A spoiled police chief's son storms into a small-town diner and mocks a tired waitress for being poor. But when her sick puppy whimpers under the counter, he does the unthinkable. He kicks the basket. She falls to her knees, shielding her tiny dog with her body, trembling but unbroken. He laughs, certain his father's power makes him untouchable. But sitting at the counter behind him was no ordinary man. He was a Navy SEAL, and within minutes he'd exposed the rot that ruled the entire city. Before we begin, please help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. Your single click truly means more than you know. God bless you for keeping hope alive. The last light of Charleston clung to the windows of the Harbor Light Diner, turning the humid glass into sheets of amber. Outside, the air smelled of salt and gasoline. Inside, the ceiling fans turned in lazy, uneven circles. Lila Brooks, 26, wiped down the counter for the 100th time, her movements slow but precise. 14 hours into her shift, her pale blue uniform had lost its color to grease and fatigue. Tall but slender, with auburn hair tied back in a loose ponytail and faint freckles across her nose, she looked like someone trying to hold the world together with her bare hands. Beneath the register, hidden by her purse, was a wicker basket lined with a towel. A soft, sickly cough rose from within. Lila knelt quickly, lifting the edge of the towel. Inside lay Buddy, a tiny German Shepherd mix, silver gray and cream fur matted from the storm she had pulled him from 3 nights earlier. His ribs showed, his lungs rattled faintly, and his eyes opened only halfway when she touched his head. The vet had said he wouldn't last the week, that pneumonia had already taken hold, but Lila couldn't leave him. Every 4 hours she fed him medicine, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "Almost home, little man," she murmured. "Just hold on." At the counter sat a lone customer, Ethan Cole, 35, his quiet presence filling the diner more than noise ever could. Broad-shouldered and lean, his skin carried the rough tan of desert sun. Short, dark hair, graying at the temples, framed a face built from restraint. Square jaw, faint scar, steady blue-gray eyes that saw too much and revealed nothing. He drank his black coffee like a man who didn't need warmth, only habit. To Lila, he looked like someone who had been built for battle and forgotten how to stop fighting. In truth, Ethan was a Navy SEAL on leave, back from the Middle East, where orders and mercy had often collided. He came to Charleston because no one here asked questions. Their silence was a language of its own, her exhaustion, his quiet observation, the hum of the refrigerator keeping rhythm. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, unhurried. "He's sick, isn't he?" She froze, startled. "The dog," he clarified, eyes still on his cup. Lila sighed, defeated. "Pneumonia. I found him after the flood." Ethan nodded once. "You did the right thing." Just 4 words, yet they eased something in her chest that had been tight for days. She glanced at him, unsure why his calm mattered so much. Maybe because he looked like someone who knew what loss felt like and still chose to care. Thunder rumbled faintly across the harbor. Lila flinched, memory flashing of rainwater rising around her knees, of Buddy's shivering body in her arms. She blinked it away, focusing on her work. Ethan watched her, recognizing that look, the kind that soldiers wore when the war was over but hadn't left them. "You from around here?" he asked, quietly. "No," she said. "Came down from Greenville. Needed work?" "Alone?" he asked. "Just me," she answered, hesitating before adding, "and him." She nodded toward the basket. Ethan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "That's enough sometimes." For a while, the world outside disappeared. The radio hummed an old country tune, and the golden light turned softer, almost kind. Lila leaned on the counter, feeling the ache in her wrists, the tremor of fatigue in her fingers. "You ever wish time could just stop?" she asked suddenly. Ethan thought for a moment. Stopping's dangerous, gives the ghosts room to talk. She half smiled. Mine never shut up. He finished his coffee and set the cup aside. Then maybe it's not silence you need. Maybe it's someone who listens. The line landed like something she didn't know she needed to hear. Rain began to tap against the windows, slow and uncertain. Lila pulled the blinds halfway, muting the glow of the streetlights. Beneath the counter, Buddy stirred, letting out a soft whimper. She crouched again, stroked his fur until his breathing steadied. "It's okay," she whispered, unsure if she meant it. When she looked up, Ethan was already standing, sliding a few bills under the saucer. "You should get him home before the storm hits," he said. She nodded. "I will." He paused by the door. "You've got fight in you, Lila?" She blinked. "How do you—" "Seals notice things." He gave a slight nod and stepped out into the rain. Lila watched through the fogged window as his figure disappeared under the street lamp. The rain thickened, drumming softly against the glass, steady as a heartbeat. She turned off the radio. Silence returned, broken only by the hum of the ceiling fan. Beneath the counter, Buddy sighed in his sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling. Lila crouched beside him, whispering, "We'll be okay. Just one more night." Outside, thunder rolled closer. Inside, everything held still, the light, the air, the waiting. The storm had not yet begun, but it was coming. Rain fell steady over Charleston, drumming against the glass of the Harbor Light Diner. The streets outside shimmered like dark rivers under the morning lights. Inside, Lila Brooks moved wearily behind the counter, her hair tied neatly, though exhaustion still clung to her pale face. Beneath the register, Buddy, the little shepherd, lay curled in his basket, breathing faintly but alive. She bent to whisper, "Hang on, little one." The doorbell chimed as Ethan Cole stepped inside, rain dripping from his jacket. He'd come back, claiming he'd left his wallet. But the truth was simpler. He couldn't ignore the feeling that something bad might happen here. Lila glanced up. "You again?" she said with a tired smile. "Guess I forgot to pay for my luck," he replied, settling into the same stool. Moments later, the diner's calm shattered as the door burst open. Brandon Miller, 28, strode in like he owned the place. Tall, broad, blonde hair slicked back, leather jacket gleaming with rain. His grin carried the arrogance of someone who had never faced consequence. Everyone in Charleston knew that face. He was the only son of Police Chief Walter Miller, a man whose badge carried more weight than the law itself. Beside him was Chloe Scott, 25, his girlfriend and self-styled influencer, live-streaming their entrance with a glittering smile. "Retro vibe," she said to her followers, panning her phone. "Smells like cheap coffee and broken dreams." Brandon laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "3 coffees, sweetheart," he called to Lila, "and make it quick." Layla nodded silently, her movements controlled but tense. Beneath the counter, Buddy shifted, a soft whimper barely audible. Ethan watched from the stool, quiet but alert. He'd seen this type before, the son of power, untouchable and bored. Chloe mocked the menu while Brandon smirked, drumming his fingers. "Do people actually eat here?" she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Lila placed their order on the counter and turned to fetch plates when Chloe's elbow knocked over a glass. The drink spilled across the table, soaking her sleeve. She gasped, outrage replacing poise. "Are you kidding me? This place is cursed." Brandon stood abruptly, towering over Lila. "You can't even serve a drink right?" His hand shot out, gripping her arm. "You just ruined a $1,000 jacket." Ethan's voice cut through the noise. "Let her go." Brandon turned, sneering. "You talking to me?" "You heard me." Ethan didn't rise. His tone alone changed the air. Chloe tugged at Brandon's arm. "Let's just leave, babe." But Brandon smirked. "Nah, old man wants to play hero." He squeezed Lila's arm harder. Then came the faint sound of a cough. Buddy, frightened by the shouting. Brandon froze. "What the hell is that?" "Nothing," Lila said quickly. But the puppy whimpered again. Brandon shoved past her, crouched, and flipped the towel aside. "A dog? In a diner?" His voice rose with disgust. "You filthy little liar!" He kicked the basket once, grinning when it shook. "Stop!" Lila cried, lunging forward. Brandon drew his leg back for another kick, but she threw herself over the basket, taking the blow square in the ribs. Pain lit her body like fire. "Don't touch him!" she gasped. The diner froze. Chloe lowered her phone, stunned. Ethan stood, calm, decisive. 2 strides and his hand snapped around Brandon's wrist. 1 twist, precise, controlled, and Brandon was face down against the counter. "You're done," Ethan said quietly. Brandon cursed, thrashing. "You don't know who my father is." Ethan tightened his grip. "Then go tell him what you did tonight." He released him only when the fight left his body. Brandon stumbled back, face red with humiliation. Chloe, shaken, grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. Rain swallowed them as they left. Silence fell heavy. Lila knelt beside Buddy, trembling. The puppy whimpered, but lifted his head. She exhaled, half sob, half relief. Ethan crouched beside her, voice steady. "He's tougher than he looks." "You shouldn't have helped," she whispered. "You shouldn't have had to ask," he said. Lightning flashed white through the windows. Ethan nodded toward the door. "Lock up early tonight." Then he was gone, his figure fading into rain. Lila held Buddy close, feeling his heartbeat against her palm. The line had been crossed, and somewhere beyond the storm, she knew trouble was coming. The morning after the storm broke gray and heavy over Charleston. The Harbor Light Diner stood silent, its neon sign flickering weakly against the drizzle. Inside, the floor was still damp where the night's chaos had played out. Lila Brooks stood near the counter, pale and shaken, her ribs aching from where Brandon's kick had landed. She'd barely slept. Buddy had coughed through most of the night, his small body trembling under a blanket. But when she finally walked back into the diner that morning, it wasn't quiet for long. 2 police cruisers pulled up outside, lights flashing faintly in the fog. 4 officers entered, men with heavy boots and heavier expressions. Their leader, Sergeant Doyle, was a thick-set man in his 50s with a trimmed mustache and eyes dulled by years of loyalty to power. His badge gleamed, but his conscience didn't. "Where's the girl?" he barked. Marvin, the old cook, looked up from the kitchen window but said nothing. Lila stepped forward, forcing herself to stand tall. "I'm Lila Brooks. What's this about?" Doyle's smirk was almost kind. "You assaulted the son of the police chief last night, Brandon Miller. Ring any bells?" She froze. "He attacked me first. I was protecting—" "Save it," he snapped. "We got witnesses." Behind him, a younger officer shifted uneasily. Officer Kent, barely 30, tall and lean with close-cropped brown hair and clear gray eyes, looked nothing like the others. His uniform was neat but worn, his expression more human than hardened. He spoke quietly. "Sergeant, that's not what the report said. The girl was defending herself." Doyle shot him a glare. "Stay out of it, Kent. Orders are orders." Ethan Cole walked in before anyone could speak further. The door creaked, and rain followed him in, dripping from his shoulders onto the tile. His presence shifted the room. Calm, cold, controlled. He walked past the officers without flinching. "If you're here for the truth," he said, voice steady, "I've got it recorded." He pulled out his phone, the screen lighting up with the video of Brandon's assault, the shouting, the kick, the blow that sent Lila to the ground. Doyle's jaw tightened. "You think a video changes who runs this town?" Ethan met his gaze, unblinking. "No, but it changes who's watching." Kent glanced at the footage, his face hardening. "That's enough proof for internal affairs, sir." Doyle's reply was a low growl. "You don't know when to shut up, rookie." Turning back to Ethan, he sneered. "You can walk, Seal Boy, for now, but don't make yourself comfortable in my city." Ethan didn't move. "Not your city," he said softly. "Not anymore." The officers left soon after, the sound of their boots fading into the rain. Kent hesitated by the door, offering Lila a look of quiet apology before following his unit out. Marvin finally exhaled. "You better stay low, son," he muttered too. "Ethan." "That family's got the whole department in their pocket." Ethan nodded. "I've noticed." By noon, the fallout began. Lila's manager handed her a sealed envelope, termination notice. "You brought trouble here," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Health code violation, animals in a food establishment." The words landed like stones. She packed her few belongings in silence, ignoring the stares of other waitresses. When she returned to her apartment that afternoon, a notice waited on the door. Anonymous complaint. Unlicensed animal, health hazard. She sat on the steps, soaked in the drizzle, holding Buddy close as he coughed weakly against her chest. "We'll figure it out," she whispered, but her voice shook. That night, the rain turned colder. The wind rattled the loose shutters of her window, and Lila sat beside Buddy's basket, watching him breathe. Her ribs throbbed, her eyes burned from exhaustion. She had nowhere to go and no one left to call. The silence was broken by a knock at the door, firm but not threatening. She hesitated, heart racing. Then a familiar voice spoke quietly through the rain. "It's me, Ethan." When she opened the door, he stood there in his canvas jacket, soaked to the shoulders, holding a paper bag and a bottle of medicine. "He needs another dose," he said simply. "And food for both of you." She blinked, tears stinging her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" He looked away, rain tracing lines down his weathered face. "Because I made you a target, and I don't leave people behind." She let him in. The tiny room glowed dimly under the lamp's yellow light. Ethan knelt beside Buddy, checking his breathing, his hands steady and sure. "He'll pull through," he murmured. Lila watched him, his calm, the quiet strength behind his words. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Neither are you." For the first time in days, the tension in her chest eased. Outside, the storm began to fade. Inside, two strangers and a broken dog shared the fragile stillness between survival and something that felt almost like hope. The morning sun barely touched Charleston, veiled behind thick clouds that promised another storm. In the small apartment that smelled faintly of medicine and coffee, Lila Brooks sat on the worn couch, one hand gently stroking Buddy's fur. The puppy slept beside her, his breathing shallow but steady, his small chest rising and falling beneath the old towel Ethan had wrapped him in. Her ribs still ached from Brandon's kick, but the bruises on her body weren't the worst. Fear had settled deeper. Outside, the city carried on, oblivious to how easily power could crush truth. A sharp knock broke the quiet. Lila flinched. Ethan Cole, who had been sitting at the kitchen table checking his phone, looked up. "Stay here," he said calmly, moving toward the door. His movements were deliberate, the kind of controlled precision that never left a soldier. He opened it halfway, his posture firm. Two men stood in the hallway, both in dark tailored suits that didn't belong in this part of town. The taller one stepped forward, his smile practiced. "Miss Brooks?" Lila appeared behind Ethan, clutching Buddy against her chest. The man smiled wider. "I'm Mr. Hall, legal counsel for Police Chief Walter Miller. My associate, Mr. Carver, is here as a witness." Carver, shorter and heavier, with slicked hair and cold gray eyes, nodded but said nothing. Hall continued, voice oily with false courtesy. "We're here to resolve last night's—" misunderstanding. Chief Miller wants this to go away. Quietly. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. $50,000. Cash. All yours if you sign a simple agreement stating there was no assault. You'll also agree not to press any charges against Brandon Miller. Lila stared, unable to speak. Hall placed the envelope on the counter as if setting down something precious. You see, Miss Brooks, everyone wins. You get compensated, the department avoids messy publicity, and this unfortunate video your friend recorded never needs to see daylight. Ethan's jaw tightened. You're threatening her. Hall laughed softly. No, Mr. Cole, we're offering an opportunity. But if she refuses... His tone shifted, sharp beneath the politeness. Animal Control has already received a complaint about an unregistered sick dog in this apartment. I imagine they won't be as gentle as we are. Lila's face drained of color. You wouldn't? She whispered. Carver finally spoke, his voice flat. We don't make threats, ma'am. We follow procedure. He glanced toward Buddy. That animal would be considered a health risk. Ethan stepped forward, his presence suddenly filling the small room. His voice, low and calm, cut through the tension. You should both leave. Hall raised an eyebrow, smug. Careful, Navy man, interfering with official negotiation? He stopped when Ethan lifted his phone and pressed a button. Everything you just said, Ethan interrupted quietly, is on record. You've just admitted to coercion and intimidation of a witness in an active assault case. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take that envelope and your lies, and you're going to walk out that door before you add obstruction of justice to your morning. For a moment, silence pressed thick against the walls. Carver's jaw twitched. Hall's confidence cracked into something darker. Then he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You'll regret this, he said softly. The chief doesn't like loose ends. Neither do I, Ethan replied, his voice like a warning shot. The two men turned sharply and left, their footsteps echoing down the hall. Ethan locked the door, his calm exterior barely concealing the fury beneath. Lila sank onto the couch, shaking. They were serious, weren't they? Ethan crouched beside her. Yes, and they'll try again, but next time they won't knock first. He reached for Buddy, gently checking the puppy's breathing. You need to pack. We're not staying here. Lila nodded slowly, tears streaking her cheeks. I don't want to run. You're not running, Ethan said, standing. You're surviving. There's a difference. That night, as the rain returned, Ethan sat by the window, phone pressed to his ear. On the other end of the line, a gravelly voice answered. Cole, you in trouble again? Captain John Reed, Ethan's former commanding officer, still sounded like a man carved from iron. Broad voice, steady tone, the kind that could silence a room. Depends how you define trouble, Ethan replied. Local PD's trying to bury a case. Chief's son assaulted a civilian. They're covering it up. Reed grunted. You never pick easy fights. Didn't pick this one, Ethan said. But I'm not backing off. Reed was silent for a moment. I'll make a call. Someone owes me a favor in NCIS. Agent Kim. Remember her? Ethan's lips curved faintly. How could I forget? Special Agent Sasha Kim, Korean-American, early 30s, sharp-eyed and sharper-minded, had worked with him on a mission years ago. She was known for her composure, her dark humor, and her ability to make entire bureaucracies move with a single phone call. She's in D.C. now, Reed continued. If there's a thread to pull, she'll find it. Sit tight. And Ethan, watch your six. When the call ended, Ethan looked toward Lila, asleep on the couch with Buddy nestled against her arm. The faint light from the street touched her face, softening the bruises along her jaw. She looked peaceful for the first time in days. But Ethan's instinct screamed otherwise. He knew the look in Hall's eyes, the kind of man who didn't take humiliation well. Power never forgave defiance, and the chief's reach ran deep. Outside, a black sedan slowed as it passed the building. Headlights dimmed. Ethan's hand drifted toward his jacket, the soldier in him still awake. Trouble wasn't coming. It was already circling. The night air along the Ashley River was damp and cold, the fog rolling low across the water like a living thing. A faded warehouse stood on the outskirts, long abandoned except for the dim light seeping through a single window. Inside, Ethan Cole moved quietly, checking locks and securing blackout curtains. The room smelled faintly of dust and gun oil. It wasn't much, but it was safe, for now. He'd used this place years ago during training exercises, a forgotten coordinate off every local grid, accessible only through an encrypted military channel. He turned to Lila Brooks, who stood in the doorway clutching Buddy in her arms, her face pale but resolute. "This'll do," Ethan said simply. The apartment was bare, a cot, an old stove, a few crates stacked as makeshift furniture. Lila set Buddy down carefully on a folded blanket. The puppy sniffed around, his tail twitching nervously. "He's still not eating much," she murmured. Ethan knelt beside the small dog, his hand resting gently on the shepherd's mottled fur. "He's tougher than he looks. He just needs to trust that he's safe." He glanced up at her. "You both do." Lila's lips tightened into a faint, grateful smile. The bruises on her ribs had darkened, but there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a spark of defiance fighting through exhaustion. Morning came gray and heavy, but for the first time in days, the sound of footsteps on the floor didn't send her heart racing. Ethan brewed coffee in a dented pot, while Buddy lapped water beside his bowl. When they finished breakfast, Ethan stepped outside into the courtyard and gestured for her to follow. "We're starting something today," he said. Lila frowned. "Starting what?" "Control," he replied. "You can't change the world around you, but you can change how you meet it." He handed her a short wooden stick. "Lesson 1, he said, his tone half serious, half gentle. "Never step back, not when you can stand your ground." He showed her how to hold her weight, feet balanced, shoulders loose, eyes forward. "You don't have to be strong," he said. "You just have to be steady." His voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd taught others to survive far worse. Lila tried, awkward at first, but when Buddy barked at the sudden movement, she steadied him with a soft, clear command. "Buddy, stay." The puppy froze, then sat down, his tail wagging once. Ethan smiled faintly. "See? You're the leader he was waiting for." By noon, her movements had changed. Small things, barely noticeable, but different. Her back straighter, her voice clearer. The fear hadn't left, but it no longer owned her. As they rested by the open door, sunlight breaking through the mist, she asked quietly, "Did you ever have someone teach you like this?" Ethan's gaze drifted to the water. "Yeah," he said after a long pause. "My first team sergeant. Afghanistan. 2008. He taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about standing up while you still are." He smiled without humor. "Didn't realize I'd have to relearn it here." Lila nodded. "Guess we both are." In the following days, a fragile rhythm formed. Ethan fixed the generator and checked perimeter sensors while Lila cooked and tended to Buddy. The puppy was healing quickly, his breathing steadier, his eyes brighter. Ethan showed her how to give him hand signals instead of verbal commands, training him to stay focused under distraction. "Don't pull the leash," Ethan said one morning, watching her practice. "Buddy doesn't need restraint. He needs direction." She laughed softly. "Kinda like me, huh?" Ethan's smile was small but real. "Exactly like you." For a brief moment, the world felt ordinary again. But peace never lasted long for people marked by chaos. One early morning, while fog still clung to the riverbank, Lila and Ethan were in the park behind the safe house, practicing Buddy's recall commands. The sound came out of nowhere. An engine revving, loud and fast. A black sports car tore down the path, tires hissing against the wet pavement. Brandon Miller's silver grin flashed from behind the wheel. He slowed as he passed them, eyes gleaming with mockery. "Miss me, sweetheart?" he shouted over the roar. Buddy barked furiously, fur bristling, while Lila instinctively stepped back. Ethan moved in front of her, hand steady on her shoulder. Brandon laughed and revved the engine again, circling once before speeding off toward the main road, tires screeching. His laughter lingered long after the car disappeared. Lila's hands shook. "He found us," she whispered. "No," Ethan said, eyes cold. "He followed me." He pulled out his phone, switching to his encrypted contact list. "We're done hiding." He raised the device, capturing the tail end of the car's license plate as it turned the corner. "Smile for the camera, Brandon," he muttered, pressing record. Within minutes, he had forwarded the footage to Special Agent Sasha Kim. When the message sent, Ethan exhaled slowly, the soldier in him surfacing again, sharp, focused, unyielding. "They want a war," he said quietly, "but we'll make them fight in daylight." Lila looked at him, the fear in her eyes slowly giving way to something steadier. Trust. Buddy leaned against her leg, his tail brushing the ground, watching Ethan as if he understood. The safe house wasn't safe anymore, but as long as they stood together, it was enough. Charleston woke beneath a washed-out sky, heavy and gray after the storm. Inside the Charleston Police Department, fluorescent lights buzzed above a stale conference room. Ethan Cole stood by the window, silent, his reflection blurred against the rain-streaked glass. Across from him, Chief Walter Miller, late 50s, thick-bodied, the kind of man who'd lived too long with unchecked power, stirred his coffee with a silver spoon. "You're quite the hero these days," Miller said smoothly. "Navy SEAL, savior of waitresses and stray dogs. But let me be clear, this is Charleston. We handle our own." Ethan turned, eyes steady. "Not anymore." The chief's smile cracked. "Careful, Cole. You're out of your depth." Ethan's voice stayed calm. "Then I'll stop pretending I'm not." He left, the sound of his boots echoing like judgment. That night, a line of unmarked vehicles slipped through the narrow streets toward the riverfront. Inside the lead car sat Special Agent Sasha Kim, NCIS, early 30s, small frame, dark hair cropped short, eyes sharp as glass. Her focus was absolute, her tone clipped. Beside her was FBI Agent Parker, tall, broad-shouldered, his face cut with years of quiet discipline. "You trust this intel?" he asked. Sasha nodded. "It's solid. Witness intimidation, obstruction. Charleston PD just lost jurisdiction." They arrived at Ethan's safe house near the Ashley River. Inside, Lila Brooks waited, pale but steady, Buddy sleeping at her feet. Sasha entered without pretense. "Been a while, Cole." "You still don't do small talk," Ethan said. She half smiled. "Never did." Kneeling, she let Buddy sniff her hand. "Good instincts," she murmured. "He learned from the right people," Ethan replied. Then Sasha spread photos and files across the table, proof of a web of silence. "We've got enough for obstruction," she said, "but we need the insider, the one closest to Brandon." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Chloe Scott," Sasha nodded. "She's scared, but she'll talk." Hours later, in a motel under federal watch, Chloe sat shaking on the edge of a bed. Her golden hair hung limp, mascara streaked like bruises. Without her camera and followers, she looked lost, a young woman who'd finally run out of filters to hide behind. Sasha sat beside her, voice low but firm. "You're safe here, but we need the truth." Chloe clutched her phone. Brandon said his dad fixed everything, that he'd make that Navy guy disappear. Her voice broke. I didn't think he meant it. Sasha's jaw tightened. Do you still have the recording? Chloe nodded. The audio was chilling. Brandon's laughter, his father's voice boasting about making the problem go away. Parker met Sasha's eyes. That's enough for a warrant. Sasha stood. Then we move tonight. They guided Chloe through the plan. She would call Brandon, pretend she was panicking, draw him out. Her hands trembled as she dialed. They came to me, Brandon, she whispered. NCIS, they know everything. What do I do? His voice came through, smug and lazy. You shut up, you hear me? I'll handle it. Handle it how? She pressed. He chuckled darkly. Same way I'll handle that waitress and her damn mutt. Nobody crosses me. Sasha gave a sharp nod. Parker signaled the strike team waiting outside. Minutes later, agents in tactical gear burst into Brandon's Riverside hotel. The corridor exploded with orders and shouts. Brandon stumbled into the hall, phone still in hand, face twisting in panic. This is a mistake. My father is already in custody, Sasha cut in, stepping forward, badge raised. Brandon Miller, you're under federal arrest. His arrogance collapsed into silence as cuffs clicked around his wrists. Across town, the lights still burned in Chief Miller's office. 2 U.S. Marshals entered, badges glinting under the dim light. The chief rose from his chair, red-faced. You can't do this. I'm the law here. Not tonight, one marshal said, pulling out the warrant. Walter Miller, you're under arrest for obstruction and witness intimidation. The old man's defiance flickered, replaced by the hollow look of someone watching an empire crumble. By dawn, every headline screamed the same story. Police chief and son arrested in federal probe. Ethan stood on the safe house balcony as the sun broke through the mist. Lila joined him, Buddy pressing between their legs, tail wagging faintly. Is it over? She asked. Ethan looked at the horizon. Justice doesn't end, it just finds new hands. Buddy barked once as if agreeing. Lila smiled, soft and weary, but free at last. Then maybe now, she said quietly, we can begin again. 6 months later, the lowlands outside Charleston breathed with the warmth of spring. Fields that had once been washed by storm water now shimmered with soft gold light, and an old farmhouse sat quietly at the end of a dirt road. Its roof had been patched, its walls painted anew, but the sign at the gate was what caught every traveler's eye. Buddy's Haven. The letters were carved by hand, uneven but strong. Beyond the fence, several German shepherds ran in wide, joyful arcs across the grass, their barks blending with the hum of bees and the wind in the oaks. Lila Brooks stood near the barn, her hair loose and sunlit, the pale strands lifting in the breeze. She looked older than 6 months ago, not in years, but in the kind of calm that follows storms. Her hands were rough from work, her arms tanned, her face softer now, shaped by peace instead of fear. She had built this place with small grants, her savings, and the quiet help of neighbors who'd once seen her as a stranger. Now she was known as the girl who saves shepherds. Every rescued dog here had a scar, visible or not. Police dogs abandoned after duty, strays wounded by cruelty, others simply misunderstood. But within this sanctuary, they were learning to trust again. At the far end of the field, Buddy, no longer the fragile pup from that rainy night, bounded toward her, strong and radiant. His silver-gray coat gleamed in the sunlight, muscles rippling beneath the fur. Around his neck hung a black tactical collar engraved Buddy, Guardian. He barked once, tail wagging, as if announcing something before she even turned. You always know, Lila murmured, smiling softly as he pressed against her leg. The crunch of tires on gravel drew her gaze toward the road. A familiar truck came to a slow stop by the gate. Ethan Cole stepped out, the same brown canvas jacket on his shoulders, though it looked more worn, more lived in. His hair was a little longer, streaked with silver at the temples, and his eyes, once shadowed by war, now carried a quieter strength. He stood for a moment, taking in the sight of the farmhouse, the running dogs, and the woman who had turned survival into hope. Lila wiped her hands on her jeans as he walked up the path. "Didn't think I'd see you back this way," she said. Ethan smiled faintly. "Neither did I. But I heard rumors about a woman teaching broken dogs to believe again." His tone was low, warm, carrying that same steady calm she remembered. "You've done something remarkable." Lila looked away, modest but proud. "Guess I just followed your advice." Buddy ran between them, circling Ethan with joyful recognition. Ethan knelt, ruffling the shepherd's fur. "You've grown into a proper soldier," he murmured. Buddy barked once, pressing his head into Ethan's palm. For a heartbeat, the three of them stood connected, a quiet bond forged in pain and healed by trust. Then Ethan reached into his jacket and drew out a small, worn dog tag on a chain. "This one's the spare," he said, placing it in Lila's hand. "The real one stays with the military, in case they ever need to identify what's left. But this one's for the living." Her fingers trembled around the metal. "Ethan, It belongs to survivors," he said simply. Lila's eyes glistened as she closed her hand around the tag. "You taught me how to stand again?" Ethan shook his head, smiling softly. "No, I just reminded you that you already could." The sun dipped lower, casting a warm amber light across the field. The dogs gathered near the fence, quiet as if sensing the moment. Ethan looked toward his truck. "Orders came through. I'm heading back to base." Lila nodded slowly. "Then come back when you're ready. There'll always be a place for you here." He smiled, the kind that finally reached his eyes. "You already built it," he said, glancing toward the sign at the gate. He opened the truck door, pausing to look one last time at Buddy and Lila. "Keep him safe?" "Always," she whispered. As the truck rolled away, its sound faded into the wind. Buddy stood at the gate, tail still, watching until the vehicle vanished down the sunlit road. Then he lifted his head and barked, one clear, steady note that echoed across the fields like a farewell and a promise. Lila knelt beside him, hand resting on his fur. The evening light glowed across the wooden sign. Buddy's haven, for every soul that still believes in good. She whispered the words like a prayer, smiling not because life was perfect, but because it was still worth saving. Miracles don't always come with angels. Sometimes they come as a loyal dog, a helping hand, or a second chance. Buddy's haven reminds us that God still works quietly through love and compassion in our everyday lives. May God bless everyone watching this. May He guide your heart toward kindness and peace. If this story touched you, share it, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories of faith, hope, and miracles.